The Aeronaut and the Eye of the Union, Thaddeus Lowe and the Genesis of Aerial Warfare. The American sky in the mid-19th century was not a canvas of routine transit or commercial flight. It was an uncharted ocean, a realm of wonder and daring reserved for the most ambitious of pioneers. Among these audacious few, the name Thaddeus Sobieski Constantine Lowe would rise higher than any other. Born in 1832, a self-educated New Hampshire farm boy who became a traveling showman, Lowe possessed a restless mind, a flair for the dramatic, and an utterly singular obsession: the conquest of the atmospheric currents. He was, to the public eye, a master showman, Professor Lowe, the celebrated aeronaut, but to himself, he was a scientist poised on the brink of revolution. Lowe's initial and most profound ambition was not military. It was a grand, almost transcendental scientific endeavor, a grand transatlantic flight. He envisioned a colossal aerostat, a great western of the air, capable of carrying a crew across the vast, tumultuous Atlantic Ocean, a feat that would forever erase the geographic boundaries separating the Old and New Worlds. In the years leading up to the Civil War, this was not mere fantasy. It was a serious, funded, and highly publicized engineering project. In 1859, Lowe's prototype, the City of New York, a massive silk balloon of over 100,000 cubic feet capacity, was nearing completion. The sheer scale of the operation was staggering, reflecting a public fascination that ran deep. People flocked by the thousands to witness his trial ascensions, their imaginations captivated by the promise of unfettered aerial travel. The press of the time was full of breathless accounts of Lowe's folly and Lowe's triumph, establishing him as an authentic American celebrity. The preparations for the transatlantic attempt culminated in a series of successful, long-distance flights designed to test the limits of his gas-filled Leviathan. These were not short hops over a city park. They were journeys into the unknown. On April 20, 1861, for instance, in a final preparatory test, Lowe launched a balloon from Cincinnati, Ohio, intending to test the prevailing westerly winds. Fate, or perhaps the fickle nature of the air currents, had a different plan. The wind shifted violently, dragging him on a grueling 9-hour journey to the southeast. Lowe descended not in the familiar, supportive territory of the North, but in the hostile, deeply suspicious landscape of Unionville, South Carolina. It was a small rural community, and the date was profoundly significant, just days after the firing on Fort Sumter, the official commencement of the American Civil War. Upon landing, he was immediately surrounded by armed, distrustful locals. His sophisticated instruments, his silk and rope contraption, and his metropolitan manners marked him instantly as an outsider, and, in the prevailing climate of paranoia, a spy. The local newspaper, the Unionville Journal, would later report the arrest of a suspicious person who came down in a balloon. Lowe was hauled before local authorities, his earnest explanations about meteorology and scientific endeavors falling on deaf, war-ready ears. The sheer astonishment of the local populace, who had never seen such a machine, quickly curdled into nationalist fear. He was an invading force from the sky. Only the timely intervention of a local professor, who vouched for the concept of scientific ballooning, saved him from a prolonged imprisonment, or worse. The experience was a jarring, terrifying baptism by fire, or rather by political animosity. Lowe realized instantly that his grand transatlantic project was dead, suffocated by the outbreak of the war. But a new, even more critical destiny had opened for him. His unintentional flight into the Confederacy had proven one thing beyond a doubt. balloons could operate effectively over enemy territory. The scientific instrument of exploration could be transformed into the ultimate military asset, the Eye of the Union. Lowe made his way back north, his mind alight with a new and urgent purpose. He was no longer just an aeronaut. He was a visionary with a unique solution to the most pressing problem facing the early Union command: intelligence. The vast, tangled battlefields of the South were an impenetrable veil, and commanders were constantly operating blind, relying on unreliable scouts and guesswork. He immediately sought an audience with the highest powers in Washington. His initial attempts were met with a typical bureaucratic skepticism. Military men were creatures of precedent. They understood cavalry screens and ground scouts, not ethereal silk globes tethered to a wagon. But Lowe was persistent, and his determination was matched by his undeniable expertise. His breakthrough came through Professor Joseph Henry, the esteemed first secretary of the Smithsonian Institution and a formidable figure in American science. Henry was cautious, but open to new ideas, and he recognized the scientific integrity behind Lowe's showmanship. Through Henry's influence, Lowe eventually secured a demonstration for President Abraham Lincoln. The demonstration was meticulously planned and executed on the grounds of the Corcoran property near the White House. On a calm summer morning in June 1861, Lowe ascended rapidly in his balloon, the Enterprise, rising hundreds of feet until the city of Washington, D.C., and the encampments across the Potomac became a detailed miniature map below him. But the true genius of the demonstration was not merely the visual spectacle, it was the telegraph. Lowe had strung a lightweight copper wire from his basket down to the ground. From his lofty perch, he tapped out a message, the first aerial telegraphic communication in American history. The message, delivered to a breathless Lincoln on the ground, was simple yet world-changing in its implications. Balloon Enterprise, June 16, 1861. To His Excellency Abraham Lincoln, President of the United States. In this point of observation, a mile high, I have a magnificent view of Washington and its surroundings. I have the pleasure of sending you this first dispatch ever telegraphed from an aerial station. T.S.C. Lowe. Lincoln, a man of profound curiosity and pragmatic intelligence, was instantly convinced. The potential was clear. Real-time observation, reconnaissance that could map enemy positions, troop movements, and supply lines, all delivered with the speed of electricity. A single glance from above was worth 1,000 confused reports from the ground. The demonstration secured Lowe the title of Chief Aeronaut of the Union Army and the authorization to form the Union Army Balloon Corps. This was the official, formal birth of American aerial warfare, a moment as significant to the future of military strategy as the invention of the rifle or the steamship. Lowe immediately began constructing his fleet. The balloons were engineering marvels of their time. Vast envelopes of specially treated silk, meticulously cut and sewn to hold the volatile lifting gas, hydrogen. Lowe developed a pioneering mobile system for generating the hydrogen gas in the field, a critical innovation as hauling pre-filled balloons or bulky gas cylinders was impractical. His mobile gas generators, essentially small, self-contained chemical factories on wheels, could produce enough hydrogen to inflate a large balloon in a few hours, often under cover of darkness or intense shelling. The fleet eventually consisted of 7 magnificent aerostats, each named with the flair of a true showman and the earnestness of a military necessity: Eagle, Constitution, Union, Washington, Fayette, Intrepid, and the largest, the Great Western. Each balloon was a delicate yet immensely powerful instrument of war.
The deployment of the Balloon Corps to the field of battle marked a revolution in military intelligence. It was in the early skirmishes and the subsequent Peninsula Campaign of 1862 that Lowe's vision truly came to fruition. General George B. McClellan, initially skeptical, quickly became an enthusiastic convert, realizing the invaluable advantage of the aerial perspective. Lowe and his intrepid team of civilian aeronauts, including his brother-in-law Professor James Allen and the equally daring James and Ezra Allen, would ascend almost daily, often under heavy fire. Towed by horses or mule teams, the balloons would rise from the ground behind the Union lines. From their woven baskets, a mile or two in the sky, they would sketch detailed maps, mark battery placements, and track Confederate movements, relaying the vital information via telegraph to the Union commanders waiting below. The Confederates, having no equivalent technology, were utterly unnerved. They referred to Lowe's balloons as Yankee spy globes and devil's eyes, and their efforts to shoot them down became a source of both frustration and dark humor. Soldiers would empty their rifles at the soaring silk target, their rounds falling harmlessly hundreds of feet below the basket. The sight of a Union balloon rising was a clear signal to the Confederate troops that their positions were exposed and their maneuvers had been compromised.
One of the most remarkable and detailed accounts of Lowe's operational genius came during the Battle of Fair Oaks, Seven Pines, in late May 1862. Due to flooding and poor planning, the Union forces were effectively split by the rising Chickahominy River, leaving two corps isolated on the Confederate side of the water. General McClellan and his command were desperate for information on the Confederate troop concentrations and movements that threatened to overwhelm the isolated Union positions. Lowe, seeing the urgency, prepared his largest and most reliable balloon, the Intrepid. The balloon's gas was running low and the mobile generators would take too long to produce enough for a full inflation. In a moment of pure, audacious resourcefulness, the kind of ingenuity that only a self-made American engineer could devise, Lowe ordered the Intrepid to be tethered next to the already partially inflated Constitution. He then had the two balloons connected by a long rubber hose and, using a primitive form of air pump, he successfully transferred the gas from the Constitution to the Intrepid. It was a hazardous, unprecedented maneuver, essentially a mid-air balloon transfusion, but it worked. The Intrepid swelled, becoming buoyant enough for a crucial ascent. Lowe immediately went aloft, accompanied by a telegraph operator. The scene from the basket was one of utter chaos, thick gun smoke billowing from the forest, the roar of artillery echoing below, and the frantic, disorganized movement of battle. Lowe reported his observations directly to McClellan, offering the critical intelligence that helped prevent a Confederate breakthrough and likely saved thousands of Union lives. The Balloon Corps, despite its staggering successes, was a technology ahead of its time. Its very novelty made it vulnerable not to enemy fire, but to political infighting and bureaucratic short-sightedness. As the war ground on and General McClellan was relieved of command, his enthusiasm for the Corps was lost. The new commanders, less familiar with the technology, failed to grasp its value fully. Furthermore, the civilian status of Lowe and his team, who were paid at a higher rate than regular officers due to the danger and specialized skill, became a point of professional jealousy within the military ranks. The struggle to integrate this amazing new technology into a centuries-old military institution would eventually prove to be the most difficult battle Lowe faced.
The struggle facing Thaddeus Lowe was not solely meteorological or mechanical. It was fundamentally political and financial. He and his team, though performing acts of incredible bravery and delivering vital intelligence, were civilian contractors. Their high, specialized pay, a necessity to attract and retain the unique expertise needed to handle volatile hydrogen gas and massive silk envelopes, became a target for the career military bureaucracy. The height of the Balloon Corps' operational success came during General George B. McClellan's Peninsula Campaign in the spring and summer of 1862. This ambitious yet ultimately stalled drive to capture the Confederate capital of Richmond saw Lowe's aerostats deployed almost daily, serving as the Union's indispensable eyes. The Siege of Yorktown and the Phantom Artillery. The first major deployment came during the Siege of Yorktown, April 1862. For weeks, McClellan's massive Union army lay stalled, convinced that the Confederate fortifications were bristling with heavy artillery and impenetrable defenses. McClellan, ever cautious, settled into a slow siege, wasting weeks building enormous earthworks and dragging siege guns forward. Lowe and his team, however, were aloft. Ascending from a barge on the Warwick River, an ingenious early example of an aircraft carrier, Lowe made repeated observations. He telegraphed down detailed reports, confirming that the Confederate line was far weaker than feared. Crucially, his reconnaissance revealed that the feared heavy artillery consisted largely of Quaker guns, logs painted black to resemble cannons, a brilliant piece of Confederate deception. Lowe's reports, however, were often met with skepticism, sometimes even being dismissed by McClellan's engineers, who preferred their ground-level, tradition-bound surveys. It was a classic clash between old military doctrine and revolutionary technology. Despite the doubts, Lowe continued his work, meticulously charting the enemy's sparse earthworks and the actual limited troop dispositions. When the Confederates finally evacuated Yorktown, the Union forces found the defenses to be exactly as Lowe had described, thinly held and deceptive. The wasted weeks were a testament to the cost of not fully trusting the intelligence gathered from the air. The Battle of Seven Pines, a mid-air transfusion. The campaign moved on toward Richmond, culminating in the fierce Battle of Seven Pines, Fair Oaks. This was the moment where Lowe's ingenuity truly saved the Union line, as briefly mentioned earlier. When the Union forces found themselves cut in half by a rapidly swelling river, General Samuel P. Heintzelman, isolated on the Confederate side, was facing annihilation. The only operable balloon, the Constitution, was low on lifting gas. Lowe, racing against the clock as the sounds of battle intensified, executed his famous gas transfer. He landed the Constitution, rolled the heavier-duty Intrepid, which had a larger capacity for observers and equipment, next to it, and connected the two envelopes with a canvas sleeve and a simple exhaust pump. This improvised high-risk procedure successfully siphoned the precious hydrogen from one balloon to the other. Lowe and his brother-in-law, Professor James Allen, immediately ascended in the Intrepid. Despite the heavy shell fire and the difficulty of maintaining a stable position in the turbulent air above the raging battle, they stayed aloft for hours. The view was horrific but strategically vital. Columns of Confederate troops were clearly visible moving to flank the Union's isolated left wing. Lowe's telegraphic dispatches were constant, relayed directly to General McClellan and his field commanders. The enemy is moving a large force under the cover of the woods toward the left flank of General Heintzelman. Artillery concentration observed at coordinates B4. Recommend immediate reinforcement of Casey's position. This real-time overhead view allowed McClellan to move reserves precisely where they were needed, countering the Confederate flanking maneuver and preventing a catastrophic rout. The Intrepid's flight was not merely observation. It was direct, real-time tactical control executed from the air. This action alone firmly established Lowe's balloon corps as an indispensable military asset. The Confederate counter-effort and the Sarah. The success of Lowe's aerial reconnaissance was so demoralizing and effective that the Confederates were driven to attempt their own version. Their effort, though valiant, was doomed by the South's crippling industrial limitations, particularly the scarcity of gas-producing chemicals and high-quality silk. The Confederate hopeful, Captain John Randolph Bryan, managed to construct a hot air balloon nicknamed the Sarah, primarily from salvaged brightly colored silk dresses donated by the ladies of Richmond. The Sarah was crude, unreliable, and was often inflated with smoke, which offered significantly less lift and was highly visible. In a famous and slightly comical incident, the Sarah was deployed from a specially fitted steam tug, the Teaser, on the James River. The plan was to use it for observation and possibly even to drop rudimentary bombs.
During one such deployment, the balloon was nearly captured by a small Union gunboat. In the panic, the Confederates cut the tettle rope. The Sarah drifted across the river, landing near the Union lines. Union sailors immediately seized the silk envelope and, lacking any other material, famously cut it up and used the colorful silk as lining for officers' coats, ending the Confederate Air Force with a bizarre clothing anecdote.
Lowe's superiority was undeniable. He was running a modern, technologically advanced military operation, while the Confederates were resorting to jury-rigged showmanship. The downfall, bureaucracy, and betrayal. Despite the irrefutable evidence of the Balloon Corps' value, it had saved Union lives, provided irreplaceable maps, and averted military disasters. Lowe's position began to erode after McClellan's effective removal in late 1862. The subsequent commanders, particularly General Joseph Hooker, lacked McClellan's vision and were less inclined to support a costly, high-tech civilian operation. The central point of conflict was the issue of rank and pay. Lowe was a civilian paid $10 per day, a rate commensurate with his unique skills and the extreme risk involved. It was equivalent to a colonel's pay. Jealous officers who saw themselves as higher ranking resented taking orders or advice from a civilian professor. In early 1863, the military establishment, under the direction of the Engineer Department, decided to assert control. They placed the Balloon Corps under the command of a low-ranking, inexperienced engineer captain. The new commander immediately slashed Lowe's pay to $6 per day and demanded that Lowe turn over the proprietary equipment and take orders from a junior officer. Lowe, a proud and brilliant entrepreneur, refused to be humiliated. He understood that his value lay in his expertise, not his military rank. Faced with insufferable micromanagement and the deliberate devaluation of his vital work, Lowe resigned in May 1863. His departure was the death blow for the Balloon Corps. Without Lowe's technical genius, leadership, and personal ingenuity, he was the only one who could truly manage the complex gas generation and risky ascents. The Corps quickly fell apart. His remaining civilian aeronauts quit shortly thereafter, unwilling to work for reduced pay under a hostile command. By the summer of 1863, at the pivotal moment of the war, the Union Army's eyes in the sky were gone. The remaining balloons and equipment were stored and eventually transferred to the artillery, where they slowly rotted away, a tragic casualty of military bureaucracy and professional envy. Lowe's extraordinary contribution was effectively erased from military history for decades. The Union Army would not field another significant aerial reconnaissance unit until the development of the airplane decades later. Thaddeus Lowe, the father of American military aviation, faded from the spotlight, his crucial role forgotten by the public who had once adored his daring ascents. Post-war legacy and reinvention. Lowe's life, however, was far from over. His restless mind, having conquered the military sky, turned to the peaceful application of his scientific expertise. After the war, he became a wealthy and successful inventor and industrialist, demonstrating the quintessential American spirit of reinvention. He developed groundbreaking technologies for manufacturing water gas, a clean-burning fuel for heating and lighting, revolutionizing municipal utilities and making him a significant fortune. He created a revolutionary ice-making machine, a commercial refrigeration system that allowed for the mass transportation of perishable goods, directly transforming the American food and meatpacking industries. His final great act of engineering brilliance brought him back to California, where he had moved for health reasons. In the mountains above Pasadena, he envisioned a massive scenic railway, a marvel of civil engineering that would ascend the steep slopes of the San Gabriel Mountains. This became the famous Mount Lowe Railway, a multi-section electric scenic railway that was one of the greatest tourist attractions in the American West until its destruction by fire and flood.
Lowe died in 1913, having lived a life that spanned from the age of horse-drawn transportation to the age of powered flight, which he himself had helped to usher in. He was a scientist, a showman, a military visionary, and an industrial magnate. Though his balloon corps was short-lived, its success proved beyond a doubt that the future of warfare lay not just on the land and sea, but in the boundless domain of the air.
To understand how Thaddeus Lowe achieved aerial supremacy for the Union, one must delve into the specifics of his engineering genius, which was perhaps more remarkable than his piloting skills. The core challenges he solved were not just getting a balloon into the sky, but reliably generating the necessary lifting gas and constructing envelopes that were both lightweight and durable enough for continuous military use. The chemical revolution. Mobile hydrogen generation. The central problem for any large-scale balloon operation was the source of the lifting gas. Pre-filled balloons were too vulnerable and bulky to transport. Lowe's solution was the mobile hydrogen generator, an unprecedented technological marvel that transformed his balloon corps from a novelty into a strategic asset. The process. Lowe's system was essentially a chemical factory on wheels, mounted on a custom wagon train. The process involved a simple yet highly controlled chemical reaction. Raw materials. The primary components were iron filings, or often just scrap iron. These were readily available industrial materials. The reaction. The iron and acid were mixed in large, lead-lined wooden tubs or vats. The reaction produced hydrogen gas and iron sulfate, or copper sulfate if he used copper scraps. Purification. The nascent hydrogen gas was highly corrosive and saturated with moisture and acid fumes. This crude gas would destroy the delicate silk and cause the balloon to rapidly lose lift. Lowe's innovative solution was to pass the gas through a series of purifying vats containing substances like lime, calcium oxide, and water. These substances neutralized the acid and absorbed excess moisture, delivering a relatively pure and cool stream of hydrogen to the balloon envelope. Inflation. The purified gas was channeled directly into the folded silk balloon through a system of flexible hoses. A full inflation of a balloon like the Intrepid, which held over 32,000 cubic feet of gas, could take between 4 to 6 hours, often performed under the cover of darkness to avoid attracting Confederate artillery fire. This mobile system was a logistics masterpiece. It allowed Lowe to accompany the rapidly moving Union Army, setting up a working airfield wherever the front line demanded, a capability that no other army in the world possessed at the time. The aerostats. Silk, seams, and sealing. The balloons themselves were not the simple rubberized fabric of children's toys. They were highly specialized, handcrafted artifacts. The envelope material, Lowe used the highest quality Chinese silk. Silk was chosen because it was incredibly lightweight, yet possessed tremendous tensile strength necessary to withstand the immense lifting power of the hydrogen. Sealing the gas. The silk, however, was porous. To make the envelopes gas-tight, Lowe and his team painstakingly applied a proprietary varnish. This varnish was a crucial trade secret, likely a flexible solution of linseed oil and caoutchouc, natural rubber, which sealed the thousands of hand-stitched seams and the pores of the silk itself, preventing the slow, inevitable leakage of the tiny hydrogen molecules. The Intrepid, the most famous of his fleet, the Intrepid exemplified this construction. It was designed to carry heavy telegraph equipment and 2 or 3 men, necessitating its massive size and durable construction. It was an airborne observation platform, not just a passenger vehicle. The mooring system. To ensure stability and allow for the controlled ascent and descent, the balloons were tethered by thick, heavy manila ropes attached to a powerful windlass, a large drum operated by several men or sometimes a team of mules. This windlass allowed the commanders on the ground to quickly reel the balloon down if it came under heavy fire or if the winds became too dangerous. The Aeronaut and the Eye of the Union. The Final Ascent and the Mountain of Dreams. Thaddeus Lowe's life did not end when he dramatically resigned from the Union Army in 1863. Rather, it pivoted from a story of wartime heroism to one of American industrial ingenuity. Having proven his scientific capabilities under the intense pressure of combat, Lowe translated his expertise with gases and high-pressure systems into immense commercial success. He invented and patented revolutionary ice-making and refrigeration machines that allowed the mass, year-round transport of perishable goods, fundamentally transforming the American diet and agricultural economy. He then pioneered the Lowe gas process, a method for manufacturing inexpensive, clean-burning water gas for heating and lighting, making him a wealthy industrialist. By 1887, Lowe, seeking relief from poor health, retired to the burgeoning Southern California city of Pasadena. But the restless energy that once drove him across the Atlantic and over Confederate lines could not be contained. He looked up at the rugged, untouched San Gabriel Mountains and saw his final grand project, the Mount Lowe Railway. His vision was breathtaking. A massive, electric-powered scenic railway that would ascend 6,000 feet into the mountains, culminating in a sprawling resort complex, the Railway to the Clouds. It was a monumental feat of civil engineering, requiring the construction of sheer inclines, massive wooden trestles, and a section known as the Circular Bridge, which circled an entire canyon to gain elevation. The centerpiece was the Great Incline, a funicular railway with a terrifying 62% gradient where counterbalanced cars hauled passengers up 3,000 feet of track. This was his last great balloon, a permanent, tethered ascent into the sublime. The Mount Lowe Railway opened in 1893 to international acclaim, becoming one of the most popular tourist attractions in the United States. Lowe had finally built his non-military empire in the sky, a peaceful culmination of his lifelong obsession with elevation. Yet destiny remained fickle. The same financial pressures and lack of capital that had plagued his transatlantic balloon attempt returned. Lowe poured his fortune into constant expansion and construction, and by 1899 he lost control of the railway to receivership. Furthermore, the mountain itself proved a hostile adversary. A devastating fire destroyed the Grand Echo Mountain House Hotel in 1900, followed by subsequent fires and floods that eventually reclaimed the entire complex. Thaddeus Sobieski Constantine Lowe lived out his final years with his daughter in Pasadena, having lost the mountain resort that bore his name, but having retained the title of a true American visionary. He died in 1913, having bridged the gap between the age of silk and rope observation and the age of powered flight. Though the Union Balloon Corps faded from the history books, Lowe's legacy quietly endures. He was the first to use aerial command and control, the first to use a mobile field gas system, and the undisputed father of American military aviation. The incredible, short-lived story of his balloons remains a testament to what one self-taught, audacious American mind could achieve when gazing not at the ground, but at the boundless sky.